All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about psychological disorders, but maybe not in the way you're used to. We're going to get into that fuzzy line, between what's just different and what's considered a disorder. What does abnormal even mean? And we're going to tackle the single biggest thing that stops people from getting help: stigma.
In this quote, "You are not alone." It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It comes from someone who's been through it, and it really gets to the core of what we're talking about today. It's about remembering the human being, the real person behind any diagnosis or label.
So, to really understand this, let's start with a story. This is Zachary Burton. He was a grad student at Stanford, and one night at 3 a.m., his whole world just broke. He genuinely believed that evil people were chasing him. It was a full-blown psychotic break. He was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and his life, as you can imagine, was never the same.
But after he got diagnosed, his biggest fight wasn't just managing his condition. It was the crushing weight of shame and stigma. It actually forced him to hide what he was going through. But here's the amazing part. Instead of staying hidden, he and his girlfriend decided to fight back. They turned his struggle into a play, a way to share his story and show others they weren't alone.
Okay, so Zachary's story really makes you stop and think, right? It brings up this really important question. We throw around the word abnormal all the time, but what does it actually mean in a clinical, psychological sense? Turns out it's a lot more specific than just weird or different. Well, psychologists have a framework for this, often called the 3 Ds, and a behavior has to meet at least one of these criteria. First up is deviant. Is the behavior way outside of accepted social standards? Second is maladaptive. Does it actually get in the way of a person's ability to live their life, to function effectively? And finally, is it personally distressful? Is the person themselves finding it deeply troubling over a long period of time? And this is a really, really important distinction to make. Just because something is atypical, meaning, statistically rare, that doesn't make it a disorder. Think about an elite athlete. Their skill is definitely not typical, but it's not abnormal in the clinical sense because it's not deviant, maladaptive, or causing them distress. See the difference? Abnormal is a very specific clinical term.
So that leads to the next big question. Where do these disorders even come from? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. There isn't one single thing, no simple on-off switch. It's more like a tangled web of causes, all interacting with each other.
First, you've got the biological factors. This is the stuff that's literally in you. We're talking about genetics passed down through your family, the actual structure of your brain, and how your neurotransmitters, those tiny chemical messengers, are working.
Then, layer on top of that, you have the psychological factors. This is all about your personal history, your experiences, your thought patterns, your emotions, your personality, all the things that shape how you see and interact with the world.
And we can't stop there. You have to zoom out even further and look at the bigger picture. These are the socio-cultural factors. We're talking about the society you live in, your cultural background, and major life stressors like poverty. Your environment plays a massive role.
So you see, it's never just one thing. These 3 areas, biology, psychology, and social context, they all weave together. And there's a name for this. It's called the biopsychosocial model. It's the idea that all these factors interact. So for someone like Zachary, maybe there was a genetic vulnerability, plus the intense stress of school, plus the social pressure to succeed, and boom, it's a perfect storm. They all play off each other.
All right, let's make this a little more concrete. Let's take a quick look at a couple of common mood disorders, including the one Zachary has, to see how these distinctions play out in the real world.
This comparison here is super helpful. With major depressive disorder, or MDD, the core experience is that deep, persistent feeling of sadness and a loss of pleasure in life. But with bipolar disorder, it's a whole different ballgame. The key difference is mania, these periods of being overexcited, wildly optimistic, and full of energy. So it's not just the lows of depression, it's the extreme swing between those lows and these incredible highs. But here's the thing. Getting the right diagnosis, that's often just the first step. For so many people, the real battle, the thing that can be even harder to deal with, is that invisible wall of stigma. Just take a look at this number. 1 in 5. That means nearly 1 in every 5 adults in the US was living with a psychological disorder in 2019. That's not some rare or distant thing. This is in our families, our workplaces, our friend groups. Chances are this directly affects you or someone you know.
So if it's that common, why is it so hard to talk about, right? Why is there still so much silence, so much shame wrapped up in all of this?
Well, it really comes down to stigma. It's this mark of shame that makes people afraid to even admit they need help. And a lot of this is fueled by what we see in the media. You get these really vivid, sensational stories that create this false idea that mental illness equals violence. But that's just not true. The reality, the actual data, shows that people with psychological disorders are way more likely to be victims of violence, not the ones causing it.
Which brings us full circle, right back to that simple message from Zachary. You are not alone. And hearing what we've just discussed, you can see that's not just a nice, comforting thing to say. It's a weapon against stigma. It directly fights the isolation that shame creates. It's a plea for connection, for empathy.
Because at the end of the day, understanding is what beats fear. Empathy is what beats stigma. So I want to leave you with this question to think about. What can you do? How can we in our own lives start to change this conversation and make sure support is louder than stigma?